My guests today are writer-directors Yorgo Glynatsis and Sophia Vi. Now, Yorgo Glynatsis, founder of the House of Glynatsis Productions, is a director, a writer, producer, even actor and creator of award-winning LGBTQI plus short films. Now, his passion for filmmaking started in 2020 when he wrote scenes for his own acting showreel. But lacking of authentic on-screen representation and a desire of using his voice to raise awareness about a past traumatic event, he created the short film Trigger, which was nominated in British and International LGBTQI plus festivals and won the award for Best International Film at the Fuse International Film Festival in Kingston. Now, Sophia Vi is a transgender British Greek Cypriot writer, director, actor, and the CEO of Koupepia Films. Now, she trained at the London Studio Centre and the International School of Screen Acting. And Sophia has recently written and produced two short films, Koupepia and Facade, and she is currently in development on her first feature film. Now, focusing on her writing and producing, Sophia seeks to use her production company, Koupepia Films, to create short-form LGBT plus and diasporic stories of joy that can be developed for long-form features. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmakers Yorgo Glynatsis and Sophia Vi to the show. Welcome, Yorgo and Sophia.
Oh, thank you for that
Hello, Robert.
introduction.
Yeah, that was like, oh, it's nice to hear my biography
Oh,
read by someone else.
it's so lovely hearing it back third person.
Well, I will tell you this, Sophia. I had to leave a little bit of yours out, but you are, I would say, very internationally known. I know that you had I guess there was a campaign with you and Nike. Is that correct?
Yes, in Vogue magazine, I was featured as a part of the representation campaign with Nike, which was a very surreal experience, I won't lie.
Well, I will say this, and I'm going to kick this off. I loved this short film that both of you have brought forth, Koupepia. And I mean, I actually watched it a few times because not only was I dissecting it as normal, but I just loved watching it because there was something so pure about it. But for you, Sophia, what inspired the idea of the short film Koupepia?
Well, I'm British, Irish, Greek, Cypriot is basically my heritage, to sum up in a short way. And growing up diasporic and growing up away from Cyprus and not in the community, I've basically spent my whole life, as many people will respond to, being asked, "Well, where are you from?" You know, and I go, "Well, I'm British," and they go, "No, no, no, but where are you from?" And that sort of knowing look. And as I was starting my transition and starting to navigate being in the Cypriot community, in the British community, being transgender, I just realized that so many of the stories out there about being trans or being Cypriot were all about rejection. They were all about situations where parents chuck their kids out or disappointment. And I just really wanted to write a story where, the dad starts off a little bit further down the line, a little bit more about how do we make these two people see the same way and sort of meet on a middle ground. Um, and yeah, so it just became sort of a love letter between generations.
That was the very thing that I noticed about this film. And so I guess, because what I really noticed when your part came into frame and I watched your acting, I kept thinking, part of this story is personal. And it was.
I mean, deeply deeply personal. I mean, it's not uncommon knowledge that I haven't seen my parents in quite a few years and since starting my transition. And there's definitely Yorgo and I have spoken about this being on set because I would be remiss at this point to not mention the star and co-star of Koupepia, Peter Polycarpou, who is the same age as both mine and Yorgo's dad. Sorry, me and Yorgo aren't brother and sister. We have separate dads.
Yes.
But yeah, we're both Mediterranean, but separate parents. And to see a man who is the same ethnic heritage, same age, dressed the way my dad dresses, looking like a lot of this, I definitely had this moment of standing there going, maybe I should have gone to therapy rather than make a movie. But what is better than putting this into art and putting reality and your truth onto the screen in the best way. But yeah, there was definitely, without spoiling too much, the speech at the end might be everything I've ever wanted to say to my parents.
Exactly. And Yorgo, how did you come to direct this film?
So with Sophia, we knew each other before she transitioned. We used to do some dance jobs together, and then just life happened that we separated ourselves. But nothing happened, no drama. It just life sometimes happen, and then we reconnected in a, let me have it this correct, Greek Turkish LGBTQ film event in London. And she was just behind me sitting. And then she was like, "Hi, Yoko. It's me, Sophia." And obviously, I follow her on Facebook and Instagram. So I knew she transitioned. So obviously, I was like, "Hello. Nice to see you in your true form." And then, so she came to see a screening of my first film, Trigger. And then she was like, "Yogo, I've written that lovely script and I would just love to have your opinion." Then when I read it, I was like, I remember I put my hand on my heart. I was like, "Oh my God, this is so refreshing for a queer trans film. This is like, it's positive representation and it's authentic." And I was like, "Oh my God, Petros, that's my dad. I know he loves me and is with me, behind me, but he's not fully celebrating and being super comfortable." And I've learned, and I'm still learning, to accept that he's coming from a different generation, that they didn't have that representation on screen or around them. So I thought that was really refreshing from Sophia's script, that Petros is not the villain in the story. He's just a person that a lot of people know in their life, that they just want to make an effort, but they sometimes they don't know how. And so it can come across like, yeah, a bit weird, out of the place. And yeah, and then I was like, "Sophia, I want to direct it." And she was like, "I want to ask if you wanted to direct it." So I was like, "Okay, let's do this."
This is why I found this film so delightful. And Yorgo, you just said something so vitally important. In this film, we're looking at two different generations. Sometimes in the media, the LGBTQ community comes across as angry. And that's, of course, that's the media's narrative sometimes. And then you end up with two generations appearing to fight against one another. In this film, you have actor Peter Polycorpo playing Petros, the father of Michael. And what I loved here was that Petros supports his son, even though he is tolerant of his son's homosexuality. But then, and I had to go back a couple of times because there was something that hit me right off in this particular scene. And in the scene where Petros, Michael, and Dave are standing in the same room together. Now, when Dave reaches out to Petros, Petros just pulls away ever so slightly. Some audience members may notice that, and others will notice that. Now, I noticed it right off and I went, "Wait a minute." He pulled away. He's being kind, but he's still uncomfortable. Why was that small movement by Petros important to show in this film?
So exactly, you actually just say it. Petros is kind, he supports his son, but he's still uncomfortable. So I think that scene was important to do a little physical knowledge of being him uncomfortable. But I'm like, I'm here, but don't ask me for too much. I think my presence is enough, and this is what I can do. And I think a lot of parents that might be in a similar situation, like my dad, I know that probably when I'm going to present my partner, I mean, right now I'm single, but when it's going to happen, I'm thinking this is going to happen. That is going to be like, yeah, I'm here, but don't ask me too much, and maybe, yeah, that's enough. So
You know,
yeah,
just
that's
just
why I wanted
Petros's
to.
yeah, because just with Petros's presence for him, that was basically saying, this is the amount of love that I can show right now. I'm here. You know, because
Yeah.
if he didn't ever show up to the party, you know, that would have been a very, very strong negative statement. But he just showed up. His presence alone was I brought some peace to Michael, but Mike knew that how his father felt. And but then you have this beautiful moment when Petros took the first bite of Koupepia. And I actually watched that scene a few times because I just loved how he just he was taken back to his childhood, but also that his wife, who had passed on, also made it for him. So he was getting this flood of very happy memories with that first bite. And then I noticed, Sophia, your character is standing in the background, just staring and watching. And which I thought was a very, very nice touch because it started to set up the next scene. And why was that important in this film for Petros to think back to happy times?
Sophia, yeah.
So, oh yeah, no, for me as a writer, it was kind of this. It was interesting. I thought when I first wrote this, I was trying to mend the relationship between Michael and Petros. And there was just this idea that I thought, well, if he's talking with a trans woman, then it's the furthest. If he can accept a trans woman, he can accept his son. It's sometimes that it sometimes feels that being trans is such an extreme letter of the alphabet mafia, as I like to call us. That it's very difficult to sometimes accept us, and so I was trying to understand how could I possibly find common ground with my father's generation and with a people who just don't understand and refuse to understand. And so this moment where he remembers back to his wife, I think there was a moment for me with a two-pronged sort of approach of I wanted him to be human and to know that he has suffered loss and grief. And I don't believe that there is such a thing as hate in the world. I just believe that there's such a thing as grief. And I believe that the opposite of love is to be grieving. And I know within my transition and with relationships I've lost and with people who I've lost, I've also, I've grieved those relationships. And so at first, the initial thing, and this was maybe a very early version of the script, if Yorgo, you remember all the way back, Eleni, the character, comes storming in. How dare you come here? You eating all the, and and it was getting from this place of anger and place of, almost triggered for Eleni to be there. But then actually, just by, and I thought Peter played that moment so beautifully, that I could be as seething with as much anger as possible, and seeing him eat that on set, my heart would just melted, and suddenly it went from being, "Oh, do you like the food?" to, "Do you like? Oh, are you crying? Are you? I
Well, you proved
I
a
don't know how
point.
to play this."
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you proved a point. Love conquers all.
Mm,
Anger is just an emotion that is covering up a root problem.
mhm.
Grief is nothing more than love looking for a place to go.
100%.
Yeah.
And so by you creating this scene where there is this sense of love. Now Petros, he's thinking back of all of these glorious, beautiful times from childhood to when his wife would make the Koupepia for him. And uh, so when you entered the scene, I mean, this is probably, and of course, this is the really core of the whole film.
Mm.
And so your character, your character's name is pronounced again,
Eleni. Eleni.
Eleni. Okay, so when
It's the Greek translation of Helen.
okay, so when Petros is having that conversation with Eleni, and I loved it that uh, he gives her a compliment, and
Mm.
but then that's when I noticed the look on her face because he says, "I'm glad you listened to your parents and learned how to cook." When I saw the look on your face, that's when I knew this story has a personal touch to it.
Yeah, I mean that look was a real look, and creating Yorgo did amazing at creating an incredible set for myself, Peter, and also Nathan and Alexander who played David and Michael to really explore these emotions that are quite raw still for a lot of us and quite particularly for those of us who are kind of in our 30s and grew up under certain laws in the UK that meant we weren't able to express ourselves till later in life. It was a real look.
Oh, well, Yorgo, let me ask you this because you directed this film, and there is, I'm trying to see, one, two, there's three locations within the story. In each location, there's a multiple or a variety of emotions. Uh, Being the director, you must have been extremely focused to make sure that the reactions, the emotions, came alive on screen.
Yeah, that's true. It was. I'm not gonna lie. I think it was a challenging story for me because obviously Sophia, she's my friend, and then so I had the director producer help. I was like, she's my friend. I want the best for her and for the story, and then for my personal um, journey, I wanted to make a better film than the previous one. I don't think there is like a better film, but you understand, like, okay. So I was like, during the shooting, I was like, let me put myself in each character. And then also the audience is gonna watch it. So I was like, I'm probably sure, for example, the Cypriot are gonna relate to that. The parents gonna relate to that. So I wanted to make sure that every characters and every emotion portrayed on screen were balanced and paced and authentic. And I think the fact that I've put myself, because my background is acting, so I think that helped. There's like I'm very empathetic and compassionate. And sometimes it's hard because I'm feeling all the emotions. So, for example, when Sophia did the first shot, the first scene of the I don't want to spoil it, but the big speech to Petros, and I've cried. I was like, I cry, and then the team was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "No, I'm okay, I'm okay." But I went to Sophia. I was like, "That was beautiful, but we need to tone it down because
Mm.
it's a short film, and the beginning of the story starts in the party, so the audience will not know the relationship between each character before." So I was like, as you mentioned about the Sophia mentioned about like being like Eleni being straightforward, being angry. we've did few shots, but then I realized like I think it's not working because it's a short film. If it was a feature, yes, but a short, I was like, I said to Sophia, I think we need to tone it down the anger and being a more, as Sophia said, she's gonna realize like, oh, it's nice. It's not that bad father
Mm.
I thought it's gonna be like my father. And so we go more to the human connection, and sometimes we come with um, like ideas or preconceptions of people, and then when you meet them, it's like, oh, they're not exactly how I thought, and then you just calm down. It's like, okay, we can have a conversation.
And I'm glad you did that, because that's what made this film so delightful to watch. But more importantly, when a wide range of audiences see this film, they're going to receive this film the same way I did. It's endearing, it's delightful. I think for maybe parents that have uh, children that are LGBTQ or trans, that they're going to look at their kids in a different way, in a positive way, because even Petros, and this was the and this was there were three uncomfortable moments in this film. One was Petros the first time. The next two uncomfortable moments had to do with Eleni. And but Petros never showed any negativity. He never showed any bias. Sure, he was, he was still navigating the territory like any other parent from that generation would.
Mm.
And if there is anybody on this planet that got this whole thing right, you two got this right.
Thank you. That
And
means so much.
because when Petros tells her, your parents must be very proud of you, and the look on Eleni's face said everything. And when the audiences see this, they're gonna sit there and they're gonna go, "Oh, I'm that parent." And I think that point in the story, and see, here's the thing about film. The power of film is not just what we sit in the theater to watch. It's what happens after.
The
What
conversation.
what did it do to our heart and our mind? What did it do to our soul? And when we leave the theater, and if we resonate with a film, are we going to show change to others? This is that kind of film.
Thank
That's
you.
how
Oh,
powerful this film
thank
is.
you. Thank you so much.
Oh wow, it's gonna get me emotional.
It's yeah, and it really, I mean, the things that you're saying about the film is absolutely right. And I also had this challenge for myself as I was writing it, and this is, I think I've told Yorgo about this, which was I wanted to write a movie with a trans protagonist, or secondary protagonist, whereby we don't actually talk about being trans, and we don't talk about being gay, and we don't talk about, like, none of that is mentioned throughout the entire film.
I know.
All we're doing is talking about a piece of food. That's that's
And,
in essence that's what the movie's about. It's about a chat over a plate of food.
but see, here's the
Yeah.
thing. This is the third LGBTQ film that I have seen that did it right.
Mm.
All three films that I've seen, and yours is the third, there's this element of love. But your film did something. Well, no, it was, yeah, your film. There was another film, and then yours that did the exact same thing. You never mentioned the word gay. You never
Mm.
mentioned the word trans. And this is This is the thing that has always bugged me. But you did it right.
Thank you.
You did it right because you made everybody in that house, and I hope this comes out correctly,
Mm.
makes everyone appear the same. I guess I hate to use the word normal because some people
Yeah,
misconstrue the
I
word.
I
Do you know what I'm talking
totally
about?
understand what you're saying. But it basically it doesn't reduce me down to one part of my identity.
That's
It doesn't
right.
reduce it. I think this has been the thing that is, if I may make a slight comment on our industry that we're all in, is it gets very, very quickly to go, okay, well, you are trans, so you play a transgender woman who is struggling with her transition, which ultimately are coming of age stories played by young girls, or let's be frank, played by men pretending to be trans women, which and getting an Oscar for it. Um, but we're all so much more than that, and every person is highly faceted. And I definitely consider myself Cypriot above being trans, but also as well as being trans, I'm a trans Cypriot who's also Irish, who's who's hyperactive half the time, and is an actress who is also a writer, who is to limit oneself is just it's not what we want to be. And that's so I was very, very consciously active, and Yorgo as well was very consciously active as well, I know, in making sure that we're telling a story that's human, and a story that transcends identity. In fact, a very, very early writing version of it wasn't a plate of food, but I mean, this would have been a lot more on the nose. It was talking about who I believe is the greatest Cypriot role model ever on the planet, which is George Michael. You know, George Michael, the patron saint of Cyprus, basically. And so many of the older generation, and that's kind of what birthed part of the script, was so many of the older generation love George Michael because they think, wow, this guy from this tiny island in the easternmost point of the European Union, it just came and was the biggest recording artist, working with Aretha Franklin, working with Bowie, working, all across America. And he came from our little island. Yet they always seem to forget he was a completely out proud homosexual man who had many a scandal for being a homosexual man. And it's I think that there's this amazing beauty in the way how we view people like that. And it's the same way Cypriots view food. And it's the same way Cypriots view music. There is these really niche little things about culture that we latch onto, that sort of transcend identity.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. I actually interviewed George Michael's manager, and we had that conversation.
Yes.
We had the conversation.
Was that his cousin?
No, it was
Because he had two managers. One was his very dear friend, and one was actually his cousin as well, which I thought was brilliant.
yeah, it was Napier
Yeah.
Bell that was the one in the early days of
Yes.
Wham.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so there's this persona where everybody loves George Michael, the singer, and then
Mm,
there's the other side of George Michael getting arrested for
yeah.
what for all of
For,
these things.
for
And
everything he
so
did. Yeah.
even his record company, and we talked about this in the interview, even his record company said some very vile things about Michael, which is why Michael sued Sony.
Mm,
So it technically wasn't the record contract, it was what they had said about him, which I'm not even going to
yeah.
repeat. But
No.
back on
But
this
he held
amazing,
his head up high. Yeah.
yeah,
Back on this amazing film.
but that's right. You took the words right out of my mouth. Back on this amazing film. And Yorgo, I have to thank you for talking to Sophia and removing um, any anger in this film. So, Sophia, was it your idea about keeping the word gay and trans out of the film? And Yorgo, what did you feel about that small element, which is huge?
Yeah.
Go for it first.
Oh well, my thing was it was never a conscious thing to well, it was a conscious thing to write about a piece that transcends identity, but and so the fact I just kind of never mentioned it, I did just sort of go, okay, well, Yorgo, this is clearly an overtly LGBT script, but what do you want to do with it? And I did, I just sort of I did sit back quite a lot when it came to directing. I'm controlling in other ways, but did it was direct, it was Yorgo's set. And yeah, I mean, Yorgo, go right ahead.
Well, yeah, that's why I felt so refreshing when I read it. I was like, oh, we never mentioned like, hello, I'm gay, named nudge nudge, or I'm trans. Can you see it? Can you not see it? So I was like, oh, this is good. This is really, really good. And I think I never had that script when I felt like, no, this is really good. And I think there is a potential to go further, and then Sophia will mention to you, but she's already developing a TV pilot for it because we see that there is potential to do a TV series and then go a bit further with all the characters and then relationship and the complexity. And then, yes, of course, for a TV series, we're going to put a bit of anger because this is life. We all go through anger. But for the short version of the film, that's why, and I'm very grateful that Sophia on set just allow me to direct her and be like, I say, just trust me. I think we need to remove the anger. Just have a conversation with Peter. I will almost say like, just talk to Peter. Don't be Eleni, just be Sophia talking to Peter, kind of. And and then I could see the shift. Even if on set, I could see I was looking because that's how I do as a director. I like to look the crew and the other actors just to see how they react to the shots because they are the first audience. So if I can feel they feel something and they look at me, they're like doing like this. I'm like, okay, that's the shot. That's we have it. And there is this magic when you direct. You know, there's like that's the shot or that's the direction to go because there is this inner feeling, inner gut feeling telling you is like, oh yeah, I'm feeling it. It's like I am an audience right now, not the director. So I was like, okay, this is working. Let's keep doing this. So yeah, so this is what happened. I was really happy that yeah, the
You know,
trans gay was not mentioned, were not mentioned.
when I after I finished watching the film, my first thought was, this is a perfect television series. If it's
Yes.
streaming or whatever, this is a great series. And the reason I say that, it wasn't just the storyline that gave me that thought. It was the way you filmed it. It has that feeling of a television series. And so I'm waiting for the television series because, yes, I agree that you will have to put in some anger because there's got to be friction between generations. Um, but in the end, like I said, love will usually win in the end.
Yeah.
But I have to ask because I'm not going to give away the ending, which I loved. Uh, but I have to ask. There's a small twist in this film, and I don't know how many people are going to notice it. Petros seems to be more accepting of Eleni than Dave.
Mhm.
Why is
Ah,
that? Because it's a very interesting dynamic.
Mm.
yes, indeed, Sophia.
Well, I think that I'm with the short space of it, being including credits, 10 minutes, 51 seconds. Um, it's I really want to do a long form version of this to explore that after the conversation with Eleni. How would Peter go back to Dave and David, and how would he go there, and where is he just at the end of the piece? And yeah, I think it's one of those things that when you see your own child do something that that you're really struggling with, and that person is right there, and then suddenly you get thrust into a scenario with somebody who's such your complete opposite. Because David and Peter on paper are not complete opposites, and one of the things I loved about um, shooting this was I agreed with Yorgo. I quite enjoy rehearsal, which is something quite unusual for film. A lot of people don't necessarily enjoy doing table work or character work before you get to set, but Yorgo, with his background in acting, really enjoys this. And actually, we did do these table read sessions where one, they asked me a load of questions about who are the characters, what socioeconomic background do they come from, what their interests, who do I think they are, and then also they would go, well, I kind of agree with that, but I feel it would be a little more like this. And seeing the characters build and grow in that way, and really each one of them, Nathan, Alexander, and Peter, sort of really take these characters and bring them to life, suddenly made me kind of go, well, now that Peter's here, Petros is here, where would how would he respond to David afterwards? Or what would be needed for him to go and make a speech at the wedding and say that he's, all that's in that speech? Um, and I've always been really, really fascinated by is it Shane Black movies like Lethal Weapon and different things, whereby it's two people who are not supposed to be paired together get stuck in a lift, and then they have to go on a mission together, and ultimately it's not through the events of the movie that they get changed, but it's through the relationship they have with each other that ultimately they go through the three-act structure and come out at the other end. And yes, I would be I well, that's why I would like to do a long form version. um yeah.
Both of you bookended this film, and I'm seeing a lot of short films this year where you have to have a keen eye at the beginning of the film because there's something you're going to see again at the end, and your film does that. But it took me a few passes as I watched this film because I think I watched it 3 or 4 times, and because Eleni places her hand on Petros, but he doesn't pull away. He just looks at her and he accepts her. And I went, wow. From the first shot, when he pulled away from Dave, he didn't with Eleni. And I thought, wow. And of course, I'm not even going to give away the ending because everybody has to see the ending, because the ending, that it's love and it's funny. So there's two areas here. So I don't want to give it away because everybody needs to
Yeah.
see Koupepia because I loved it. And but that pull away in the beginning and not pulling away at the end, it was for a short film. You actually put in a little piece of growth there in Petros.
Exactly. I think you mentioned you're very good to see all
Yeah,
the
really
details and the
got the
nuances of the
details.
word. I love it. Can see you are passionate about films and stuff. So that's exactly what happened is like we wanted to make like there is a beginning, middle, and but the ending is an open ending, which is like
Mm.
oh we want to see more because obviously we have the goal to make a TV series out of it. So we wanted to give that ending like oh, it was too short, I want to see it, but still give an arc. And then by finishing Petros not removing the hand of Eleni, when I was like on set, I was like, oh my God. I didn't plan it, to be honest. I didn't plan this. But when Sophia did it, I was like, oh my God, yes. No, this is just doing it. This is so cute. And then, yeah, now he made a little improvement. He's less uncomfortable. So that the arc is, yeah, done, sealed. So yeah. So thank you,
Yeah,
Sophia, for doing it.
it
And
was.
I don't want to give the there's a part of the ending. I'm not going to give a part. I'm not even going to give the ending away here because it took me a couple of times when I was watching the ending. I was like, wait a minute. This is what I call brilliant writing. Even directing, Yorgo. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, you have to keep an eye on the Koupepia. The Koupepia, I'm not even going to say it. The Koupepia plays a very important part. You may not notice it in the beginning, but you will see it come around. But that ending, the look on Petros's face, and I'm like, I have to leave it there because I don't want to give the ending away it's
That's
so good because the Koupepia plays in with the whole emotional tug of war, but the Koupepia actually plays in to the role of it actually plays the role of acceptance in a very unusual, humorous way, and it just worked. I was sitting there going, I gotta watch that again because it made me laugh, and that's why
Good.
this film is so delightful, so endearing, is because every audience who sees this will leave with a smile on their face. And I think they're going to have a different idea and even parents, and so I think a lot of people are going to learn so much from this film, but they will be leaving with a smile on their face.
Oh, thank you. That's my
thank you.
personal goal, to be honest. I was like, I just wanted people after seeing the film, they're gonna go back home, or maybe after the screening, talk to each other, and if there is a parent with the child, then be like, let's have a coffee and talk
Mm.
and be more, understanding and find a common ground and knowing a bit more the children and seeing a different perception, because as we mentioned before, we put a lot of labels, in society, in the film industry. So you like this, and that's why I connected with Sophia, and I think that's why also she asked me to direct it, because I understand that, I'm like her. I'm like mix background of like Belgium, Greek, Italian. I'm gay, and yes, I'm tired sometimes when people's like, oh, so you gay, so oh my god, I love Madonna, and I'm like, I'm I'm like, I
Yeah.
Okay,
respect Madonna.
that's the
I'm
thing. That's the very thing that I've noticed in three of the LGBTQ films that I've seen this year that I noticed. And I had a very long conversation with two other filmmakers about this very same thing. Hollywood has to stop the stereotype.
Thank you.
Okay? Because the stereotyping is causing division.
Mhm.
It's causing the division within the community. It's causing a division with parents. Because the thing that I noticed in this film was it got me thinking. I'm like, okay, when parents are pushing back on their children's lifestyle choice, there's only two reasons why.
Mm.
One could be religious reasons. The second is their own personal feeling of embarrassment, meaning, what if everybody knows my kid is gay? I'm like, because you would be the same, just like a million other parents. You're not the only one,
Mm.
but they isolate their thought process thinking, I'm the only parent in the world that's got a gay kid. No, you're not. It's
No.
up to you to figure out to get you have a child. Your job as a parent, what's the parent's job to do is to love your child unconditionally.
Mm.
That's what this film, there's this it's almost like there's this secret message within this film to let parents know. Look at Petros. He showed up. Are you showing up?
Mm.
Exactly.
And and
I
I was
want to
just like,
mention,
so
yeah,
yeah.
and I want to mention then something we discussed with Sophia. Exactly what you say, Ward, is like, are you showing up as a parent? But also, are you celebrating your
Mm.
children? Because it's okay to tolerate and be like, I'm here, but then I think right now we need more celebration, queer and trans joy and celebration, positive representation, because that's gonna help people that feel like, oh yeah, but we are not the same, but we are human. You know, my sexual identity is not my identity, who I am as a person. You know, what I'm doing behind the doors is actually none of your business. But the interaction and relationship, this is something we can understand. I am a human being, you are a human being. We probably have common topics we're gonna like or things in life. And through the film, that's why we brought food, because foods like music and languages bring people together
Mm.
and
Yeah.
challenge the perceptions of people.
And And just to bounce off what Yorgo said, so a big thing I know in my head is so it's this exposure leads to tolerance, tolerance leads to acceptance, acceptance leads to celebration. And I once heard many years ago how tolerance towards the LGBT community to be defined as, which was letting, a same-sex couple go to the prom, or letting somebody present as the gender they want to go to at the prom. That's tolerance. Acceptance is nobody staring. And
Boy,
now
you couldn't have
Yeah, and
said
now,
that any better.
and now we're asking for a step further, which is celebration, which is somebody doing this and nobody staring, but then celebrating these huge moments that people have to do. And I know you said there were two reasons. I would say that there was probably a third reason to go in there, which is actually misinformation. I think in America and the UK specifically, particularly parents of a certain age who say have kids in the 90s, or kids like myself, I was born in the 80s, um, who grew up in the 90s. I mean, the adverts that were on TV over HIV and AIDS, the misinformation people have about what it means. I think there are a lot of parents who think that coming out as gay or trans is automatically a death sentence. And I actually don't think the rhetoric of the 90s has actually been undone. And it sometimes almost gets enforced by media stereotypes. And there's this incredible documentary called Disclosure, which was made by trans people about the representation of trans people in media. And it was brilliant. And trans women, particularly trans women above the age of 30, strictly play sex workers who get murdered. And so everyone there goes, well, if you come out as trans and you're above the age of 30, you're going to be a sex worker who gets murdered. And it's how else is anyone supposed to have a frame of reference outside of that if all they're seeing is that? And so I
That
think that, yeah.
that comes that stereotype, I believe, comes from the Thailand sex industry.
Thailand, but also I think it can also be so. For example, film that I think that's incredible is The Crying Game, a brilliant, fantastic movie where it can be argued extremely good trans representation, where they're filmed beautifully, they're made to be the love interest. But when the revealing that they are a trans woman comes up, the man immediately vomits. Um, Now, that reaction can be traced through Ace Ventura, can be traced through all of these other films about that seeing a trans woman means you want to vomit. And that's set in Ireland. And so I would say that that movie, with the cultural impact it had, was that it naturally led to a narrative that seeing a trans woman naked would probably make you want to vomit. So you should be ashamed about that, which therefore perpetuates this thing of shame. Um, and shame is such an interesting thing to write about, to think about, to ponder, because shame is this idea of guilt 24/7 that you inflict upon yourself where you've not done anything wrong, and you know, shame is something that eats away at you. Somebody just has to imply shame and immediately you take it on. And so I think the rewriting of those narratives is important. That being said, I do love The Crying Game and I love Dog Day Afternoon as films.
Well,
I think that's something.
you bring up a very important point, because
Mm,
nobody ever thought about making a film until The Crying Game came out. And the
mm,
only thing that anybody ever talked about was, at that time, was the shocking ending, which tells
yes.
me that everybody who watched the film never saw it coming. So to think back before the one scene,
Mm,
everybody already had acceptance they didn't know. But then that acceptance
yes.
changes the moment things are revealed. And that's where, you know, your film. I mean, to bring up Ace Ventura, because I know exactly the scene you're talking about.
The ending scene. Yes.
Yeah. And so you know your film. And to think, and I've seen this in Variety. I've seen this in
Mm,
the Hollywood Reporter. I've seen this online, where people were like, well, so and so portrayed a gay character. Why couldn't they get a gay actor to do that? And I'm like, wait a minute. You're missing the point. It's called acting.
mm,
But the acting should be a two-way street. What if we had a James
100%.
Bond film and the villain is trans, but nobody knew? Because technically, let's say if the trans part of the villain wasn't even part of the storyline,
Mm.
then
Well,
then
that's what I
yeah.
love. I love stories like that, and I love where you see. So Hunter Schafer recently did Cuckoo, um, where her trans identity. I mean, it's a horror movie. Her trans identity has nothing to to do with this horror movie, and I think, you know, she did wonderful in portraying this role. And actually, you know, I'm a huge fan of Dog Day Afternoon, and originally they were going to cast a woman in the Sarandon role, and because Dog Day Afternoon is based on a true story, and it's the true story about a man who held up a bank in New York to pay for his wife's bottom surgery, a gender reassignment surgery, or gender confirmation surgery, it's now called, and I think it's a hilarious, unhinged, fantastical story, superbly acted by Al Pacino, and would have been a wonderful woman for a transgender woman to play that role. Um, but they chose to sort of show it in a masculine, interesting light. And I actually think it's so fascinating, this about what you say about the two-way streets, because it makes me think about All of Us Strangers, the recent film with Andrew Scott. And Paul Mescal came under a lot of criticism for taking that role as playing a gay man, as a heterosexual man. And I'm there going, but the writer's gay, the director's gay. The part that is, in my opinion, should have been nominated for an Oscar is played by a very openly gay actor. And they all think Paul Mescal's the best guy for the role. Shouldn't we trust that all of these gay men know what they're casting and know who they're casting? And he was
Well,
brilliant in it. I thought it was
well, yeah,
fantastic.
and
Yeah,
it's funny because if you think back on Sean Penn when he did the movie Sam,
Milk.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or well,
Oh,
no,
I Am
no,
Sam as
Sam,
well.
where
Yeah,
he,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, because and so I'm kind of using this as an example. A lot
Mm,
of people today would go, well, why didn't you just cast someone with Down syndrome for the lead? And I'm like, but it's called acting. And
mm.
what about today? What
What?
if Mrs. Doubtfire and Tootsie never existed, but they were filmed today? And you put in straight actors into those roles. You would have half the world complaining that the two roles should have went to either gay characters or trans characters, when the whole point of the films were these two guys are trying to, well, one was trying to get an acting job, and that's funny because it was Tootsie. And
Tootsie, yeah.
yeah, but now we have too many opinions and it muddies the water. And I think it hurts
I
as a whole, it hurts everybody.
yeah. I would say that's an interesting one, I Am Sam, because did you see Peanut Butter Falcon?
No, I did not see that
Um,
one.
which was a wonderful film with Shia LaBeouf, and I'm so sorry, I forgot the name of the secondary lead character, who has Down syndrome, and he is an actor with Down syndrome, and actually his portrayal and authenticity on screen was so incredible for him to be able to portray this role that ultimately didn't have anything to do with Down syndrome, but to do with a person trying to sort of find their place in the world and find who they are. Because and it's Jen Richards in Disclosure documentary makes a very, very good point about this, regarding Eddie Redmayne playing the Danish girl, which is, for me, I don't have to play the transness. I don't have to play trans. I don't have to act trans. I can just I just am.
You're an actor.
Um,
That's all you,
I'm
and
an
that's all
actor,
you.
but it's also you do talk about your baggage that you sort of bring in and certain schools of thought, and I do think it is interesting where the conversation has kind of gone. But it's also meant that more voices like mine are getting pushed forward, which is wonderful, and so many trans writers are coming out. And Trace Lysette with Monica was an incredible feature film last year, and things like A Fantastic Woman, the Argentinian movie with Daniela Vega, was which won the best foreign language film a couple of years ago, was so incredible. But the nuance she was able to bring to it, because she didn't have to play trans, was such a fascinating thing to kind of see on screen.
Yeah. And
If I can,
Yorgo, let me ask you, Yorgo,
yeah.
Yeah,
because
sorry, I can talk about this all day.
no, I get it. I get it. I get it. I mean,
No, and we
yeah,
also accidentally we cast Cypriot as well authentically, which
Yeah,
wasn't even our intention. Obviously Cypriot's a look, but it turned out Alexander was also Cypriot. Peter, we knew, was already playing the role. And so there was one or two points we had to say, we had to speak English on set, because our producer, Anthony Petru, is also a Cypriot. And there was a few different languages floating around that we were like, it's English, it's an English set.
I love this. And I mean, ladies and gentlemen, Koupepia is a short film where the main character, Petros, a widowed Cypriot man, attends his son's engagement party. Although tolerant of his son's homosexuality, he is yet to be truly accepting of him. But over a bite of Koupepia, a traditional Cypriot delicacy, he meets Eleni, and a British Cypriot transgender woman. Now, the two appear to have nothing in common, but they bond over the food of their heritage, reframing Petros' relationship to his son, queer people, and the Cypriot identity. But the question this film leaves us with is, can people be more than is what we assume? Really comes down to stop judging a book by its cover, because the only thing that truly matters is the heart. And I want to thank you, Yorgo and Sophia, for sharing this incredible, delightful, endearing film that I think will resonate far beyond the silver screen.
Oh,
Thank you
thank you
so
so much.
much for
That's
having
such
us, and
an
thank you
honor.
for your kind words.
Well, you're very, very welcome, and I enjoyed this conversation with both of you. And as for me, ladies and gentlemen, I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.